Hello, I'm Pass Out from TAW, and I'm the squad lead of the Ghost Riders, the K-50 squadron of our North American division. The video you're watching right now is a presentation I made to my clanmates as an introduction to the DCS mission editor. We hope for this video to be the beginning of a series that we would complement with shorter tutorials, notably on the subject of triggers. Over the next hour and a half, I'll try to go over as many buttons of the interface as possible and give a brief overview of what they do. Please, if you have any comments, questions, or idea about a future video subject, please leave a comment below. We'd love to read it. Thank you, and please enjoy. Let's get started. First button on the left over here is going to be the new mission button. So if you click that, what you're going to see is the new mission settings page, and basically what that allows you to do is to create a new mission and choose which nations are going to be part of which coalition. What that changes basically is the skins that are going to be available to you for your mission, and the planes that are going to be available for you for your missions as well. Say, if you want to plop down some MiG-29s for the Red 4 side, you might want to put in Russia, because you can't plop down MiG-29s for the United States, for instance. I mean, that's something you got to do at the beginning of your missions, because once you decide which nations are part of which coalition, that's not something you can change afterwards. So basically, you got three choices over here. By default: custom, modern, and World War II. Custom is basically what we might see in the current world today as being Up 4 versus Blue 4. Modern is that as well. Anyway, you can see by yourself. Just choose the nations you want to put into Up 4 and Red 4. Blue 4 and Red 4, I'm sorry. And yeah. Alright, so second button is open file. That's pretty self-explanatory. It's just if you want to open a already pre-made mission file. Third button is save. That's also pretty self-explanatory. Fourth button is to create mission briefing. So, mission briefing is what you're actually going to see when you log on to the server, and what you're going to see as well when you press left alt and B. Typically in the briefing you want to put things such as the weather information, the different radio frequencies for like the tankers, JTACs, any radio frequencies you're going to need for the mission. That's where you want to put it. So red task is going to be for the red team, blue task for the blue team, obviously. Alright, fifth button on the left. That's going to be the weather condition. So, first up, at the top, you got the date of your mission. That's going to be important because, say you want to do a night mission, and you don't want your teammates to hate you, so you want to have like full moon night. You can't actually just decide in the weather to put a full moon. You actually got to find out, alright, in the Caucasus, what day is it going to be a full moon? You can Google that easily. I think like 15th of June is a full moon in the Caucasus. I'm not sure anyway. But that's something you got to do. In here, you got to change the date to be a full moon. Same thing if you want to do a mission in winter, for instance. Right now, the temperature over here is set to 20 degrees centigrade because it's in June. If I try to change that to be like -10 centigrade, it's gonna override it to be 8.4, which is what the game considers to be the minimum temperature logically to be in June. If I want to have some snow on my map, I gotta change that to like say January 1st, and then I can change it to -10 centigrade without problem, and then the game's gonna accept it. So that's something you gotta keep in mind over here. Then you got the cloud, so you can change the base level of your cloud, your thickness as well. Density goes from 0 to 10, and that's gonna affect the kind of precipitations you can have in your game. So right now density is 0, so that means there's no clouds in the sky, and precipitations I only can choose from none. If I go to 10, which is full cloud cover, I could go to precipitations and I have snow and snowstorm. If I change the temperature to like 20 degrees centigrade, I would have rain and thunderstorm. If the density is like a 7, so partial cloud cover, I'll only have rain. So that's something you gotta keep in mind when you're making your mission. The weather editor can be a little bit finicky. QNH, that's your air pressure in the sky. Wind, well, that's your wind, the force of the wind at those 4 heights, so 26,000 feet, 6,000 feet, 1,600 feet, and 33 feet. And you can change the direction using the wheel over here on the right. Then as well, you got the turbulence over here, the fog, and the dust smoke. If you don't want to deal with any of that when making your mission, you can just go down here and choose a weather preset depending on the season you want your mission to be in. Just keep in mind to change the month, because if you like put the month in June and choose a winter weather preset, it's gonna screw it up. So for January, I could put it winter snowstorm and then go to load over here, and then it's gonna adjust it relatively to what I chose. Alright, so 6 button on the left, that's triggers, and that's something we're gonna come back to later because that's like the most important part of making dynamic missions, and that's also the most complicated, so let's not worry about that right now. And we're gonna come back to it. Underneath that, we got our mission goals. So if you want to put down some mission goals for whatever mission you're making, that's where you put them down. As well, if you want to program some mission goals, that's where you would put them. I don't think that's what we actually use in TAW, but if you actually get to that level of proficiency in mission making, that's what you would use to do that. So 7th button, that's battlefield commanders. Intermissions, I think we have a few game master slots usually. So that's where you actually go to put down some game master slots for your game. Tactical commanders as well, JTACs and observers. I'm not exactly sure what those last 3 do. I know that game masters can control AIs and ground units, so like they can override checkpoints and guide units on the ground, give them orders basically. So that's where you go to put down slots that player can fit in. And then of course you want to check pilot can control vehicle as well. So, next button, set mission options. So that's pretty important. By default, I don't know if you guys know, but in your options, you have basically all those things which you can choose to enable or not. Those things like labels, infinite fuel, the game mode, whatever. Say you want to make your mission a hardcore mission, and you don't want people to use labels. Labels are those things that appear next to enemy planes to say, okay, that's an F-18 actually. So you can like maybe spot people easier. So say you don't actually want people to use labels. So what you're going to do is going to go into the first column over here, enforce, which means that this setting is going to overwrite whichever setting the player has set themselves. So I just checked enforce labels, and then I go into the value for labels, which is none. So it's going to enforce labels to none for each and every player playing this mission. Same thing if I was making a mission that was like a practice mission and I wanted to have unlimited weapons, I could just go over here and enforce and make unlimited weapons a positive value. So everybody would have unlimited weapons regardless of what their settings were. And you can do that for all those options, of course. Let's get into the meat of it. Let's put down some airplanes to mess around with. So, well, let's forget this green button over here. That's just to play your mission and test it. So the next thing over here is going to be add or modify airplane group. So we're going to click that, and then that menu over here appears. So, let's say we want to put down some A10 Charlies over at Kabuleti. So we're going to go country,
User
USA.
In your channel timed out.
USA, yeah. The task. The task basically is not that important unless you want to put down some AI units. That's just going to change their default configurations. You don't have to worry about that all that much as far as I know. Let's just ignore it for now. So we choose our plane over here, A10 Charlie. Your skill, you can choose average, good, high, excellent, random, or client. If you're making a multiplayer mission, you want to choose client. That's what's going to allow you when you log onto the server to actually slot in to that plane. But right now we just want to plop down some AI planes. So we're going to go random because we don't actually care. And click somewhere around Kabuleti right here. So we got 1 A10 on the grass right here. Alright, we got our pilot name over here. And we got our name for the airplane group over here, which is new airplane group. When you're making a mission and you want to make an airplane group dynamic, which is, by which I mean you want your airplane group to be interactable with triggers, you always want to give it a distinctive name. So here, I don't know, I'd go Kabuleti A10 Charlie. Just because you want to be able to differentiate it easily. In big missions, you're going to have tons and tons and tons of units. You don't want to go through new airplane group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 each and every time. It's good to give them a unique name. Alright, say we want to have more than one plane in our airplane group. All right, so we're going to go over here, over in unit, and we have 1 of 1. So we're going to go 1 of 4. Right now we're going to have 4 airplane A10C Charlies over here with random skills. The pilot name, we don't really need to care about that right now. That's going to be relevant for triggers. We're going to go back to that later. The tail number is what it says, basically. That's what appears on your tail number. It's not really used for anything except aesthetic purposes. You don't really need to care about that. The over here, that's the channel that the planes are going to use for communications between themselves. So say you have one of those 4 planes, which is a player, and then the 3 other ones are AIs. You want to note down that channel in the briefing so that the player that plays the mission can actually know which channel to communicate through, communicate to their AIs with. That's not actually an English sentence, whatever. You get the idea. Just note that somewhere so that the guys can communicate with their AIs. Call sign. Call sign is just something you use. That's just something that's going to be used when you actually use the communications menu. So when you press that, it's going to go like, I don't know, Enfield 1, requesting startup Copuleti or something like that. It's not actually important for the kind of missions we do. Hidden on map. Hidden on map is just something, well, when you make a mission, eventually you're going to have a lot of stuff on your map, and you might find it cluttered at some point. So if you click hidden on map, those guys are going to disappear, but they're not actually gone. The way you're going to find them again, well, they reappeared. The way you're going to find them again is if you go on the left through your shortcut menu, let's call it that. On the left over here, you have those 3 symbols, the triangle, losange, and square, which is view unit list. They're going to appear over here. You have your 4 Cobuleti A10Cs, which is the name of the group we've given it. And then all our 4 pilots, if you click on them, you can still select them. The menu is going to appear. And you can do whatever you want to them. That's just something that's going to facilitate your life to hide them on map or not. Late activation. That has something to do with triggers, and again, we're going to come back to it later. But yeah, actually, we're just going to come back to it later. Let's not worry about it right now. It's just going to be confusing. Let's not worry about it. So, underneath that, you got 4 tabs over here. The first one is the most important. That's going to be the route tab. And basically that's going to allow you to set waypoints and the kind of waypoints you want to set. So right now, we just clicked somewhere on the grass and we got 4 airplanes in the middle of the grass. That's not really useful. Let's say we want to set those guys so that they start up from a taxi positions. You can see over here at Cobuleti, we got taxi spots marks 32, 34, 36, etc. So, we want to go down to type over here and go click on it and go, alright, I want to go take off from parking hot. So you can see those guys just immediately snapped to parking positions over here. And they're going to start off, they're going to start the mission from those parking positions hot. If you click, for instance, take off from ramp, it's the same thing. Take off from runway. Now they all appear on the same spot over the runway. Actually, they are staggered. and they're just gonna start straight on the runway, ready to go, and whichever waypoint you set them to go to, they're gonna go to without interruption. So let's just put them back on to take off from parking hot, because we don't actually care. So, alright, those guys are in a parking spot, and we actually want to do something with them. So, say we want those guys to attack our favorite derelict airport over here. So, we actually need to add some waypoints. So, underneath all that over here, we have edit selected by default. We're going to select add. And we're going to add a waypoint over here. Click it, and then you can see it adds waypoint 1. And the type of waypoint is called a turning point. Now you can see we have turning point, flyover point, and landing. Turning point and flyover point are basically the same thing. The best way for me to describe it is probably with just my cursor, because my English is not that great. So let's imagine for a flyover point, you're actually going to see, let's imagine my cursor is the A10 right now. It's going to fly towards the waypoint, and then it flies over it, and then start its turn towards waypoint 2. If you set it as a turning point, it's going to start its turn early, and then in the middle of its turn, it's going to hit the waypoint, and then start to go towards waypoint 2. It's just a technicality, I suppose. It's not that important. But if you're making, I don't know, like a refueler, that could be important, I suppose. Alright. So, we just added 2 waypoints to our A10s. So right now, they're starting from parking hot. We can cycle through our waypoints over here. So waypoint 0 is takeoff from parking. We have our parking slots over here. If we click on edit, we can actually select each different plane in our group. And we can say like, alright, this plane I don't want to actually start over here. This plane I want to start over at parking spot 33. I could change type, take off from parking, and parking spot 33. And it's going to change that one over here. Alright. So we got this done. Now we change to waypoint 1 over here. What you actually can change about that is the altitude of the waypoint itself over here. So by default it's 6,500 feet. And your speed. Apart from the obvious change, like when you fly, where the waypoint itself is going to appear, and your speed, which is going to affect like your time on targets for the A10, for instance, you can actually use this to synchronize different AI groups together. Say you want those A10s and, I don't know, some F-18s taking off from Batumi to arrive at that target at the same time. You could actually change the speed of your A10s. Say I want those guys to go 300 knots. I'm sorry, whoops, no, not 3,000, just 300. And you're going to see your ETA over here is going to change. So that's something useful you can use to coordinate the different unit you put in your missions. Alright, and quite importantly, then you got the advanced AI waypoints. Advanced waypoint actions, I'm sorry. The best way to demonstrate that, I believe, is with tanker, actually. It's something I practiced over the last days. I don't know if it works quite well, but in my experience it did. So I'm going to spawn a new airplane group. USA. Type is going to be it's going to be a KC 130. There it is. All right. We have our KC 130 over here. We're going to add a few waypoints. Whoops, don't need that yet. So just click on add. Like what I want to do right now basically is add a circuit to the southwest of Batumi that it's going to follow until it's out of fuel, and towards which like our fighters can go to refuel. So I'm going to make a few waypoints over here. That looks about good. That's what, 15 miles, nautical miles. Oh yeah, by the way, that's one thing. If you click and drag your middle mouse button, that's going to make a ruler appear. And that ruler is going to say, for the distance you dragged it, the distance it represents on map, and the heading in which you dragged it. The ruler is going to disappear as soon as you release the middle mouse button, however. If you want it to stay on there, on the left, under the map indicator, the second button is the ruler button, and then you just click and drag it, and it's going to stay there until you click something else. So, let's say our 15 miles is good enough for our KC-130. I don't actually know what they do usually, but let's pretend it's good enough. So what it's going to do is go over here at waypoint 1. It's going to be a turning point, so it's going to start its turn before waypoint 1, hit it middle of the turn. Same thing for waypoint 2, waypoint 3, and then waypoint 4. But, of course, at the end of waypoint 4, it's just going to end there, and then it doesn't know what to do. What we want it to do is for it to cycle back to waypoint 1 over here. So, what we're going to do is go under Edit, and then Waypoint Actions. First of all, we're going to make sure our waypoint selected is waypoint 4. Because, yeah, that's the waypoint under which we want to assign the action. So, waypoint 4, Edit, Advanced Waypoint Actions, and then we go under Add over here. Now, under Add, you have the type of actions you can select. You have Perform Task, Set and Route Task, Perform Command, and Set Option. Now, there's lots and lots of things you can do with that tool. Say if I just went under Perform Task, you could say I want that refueler to orbit, to start refueling from another plane, or to follow some other plane. If I went under En Route Task, you could say Tanker, which is on the on your route to that waypoint, perform that task, which is a tanker, which is selected by default over here. See? Perform command, you can see there's a lot of stuff. I'm not going to go over them all. Just know that they exist, and you can snoop by yourself and see what you can actually set over there. Now, what we want, again, is when it reaches waypoint 4, is for it to cycle back to waypoint 1. So we're going to go to Set Option, and then under that, Perform Command, Switch Waypoint. Yes, Perform Command and Switch Waypoint. So when we choose that, we can see, alright, number over here is just, don't worry about that, it's just the number of the advanced waypoint over here. We can cycle back between 1 and 2. Don't worry about it, doesn't matter. Enable task is enabled by default. That just means, alright, toggle that thing on and off. And the name is something you can use to reference it, reference the task in itself. when you're looking for it, say when you're making triggers or other stuff like that, you don't need to worry about it right now. All we care about is this thing, which is to waypoint. And we're gonna set it to 1. So now, over here, it says under waypoint 4, when we reach waypoint 4, it's gonna switch to waypoint 1. And now it's gonna go following around that racetrack pattern all around over here. And that's how you set up a basic tanker, by the way. You could use a orbit command. However, I find it's pretty tough to refuel from a tanker that's orbiting because it's always banking to the left or right. I think it's just easier if it's following some kind of a straight path to refuel from. However, if you wanted it to orbit, you could just go to add over here and then perform task under action and go to orbit. You could set it up to a circle, and sometimes you got the option for a racetrack pattern. I don't know why it's not appearing right now, but you could set it to whatever speed you wanted and whatever altitude you wanted. I'm guessing like the last thing we could do about this tanker right now is set up the TACAM. By default, because the KC-130 only has one task over here, which is refueling, I can actually change it to, well, by default it's in refueling. One of the advanced waypoint actions is set activate TACAN. So we're going to go down into edit over here, and then we can change the channel, which is X-ray by default. We could set it, I don't know, to 51. Call sign TKR for tanker is great, and then unit, you don't need to actually assign it to anything. So then, if you were to spawn an F-18 at Batumi and tune into channel 51 X-ray, you'd actually see the call sign TKR show up on your TACAN. And that's how you would do that. Alright, that pretty much covers the first tab over here, which was route. I'm just gonna go back to my A10 Charlies because I can't actually edit the payload for the KC-130s. So second tab is payload. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can choose the payload you want for your airplane group over here. There's tons of presets, but if you want to do a new one, you can just go down here and make a new one and actually edit it by just right-clicking the square you want and just going, all right, I want to bomb there or whatever, whichever you want. That's also where you go if you want to change the internal fuel of your plane on startup and your paint schemes as well. Note your paint schemes are going to be relevant upon the nations you've chosen. So like the USA are not going to have the same paint schemes as Canada and Russia and so on. Yeah. Third tab is going to be triggered actions. So if you want to add an action that can be activated by a trigger, that's where you would go. So say you wanted your A10 Charlies to start, I don't know, to start up their TACAN beacons for some reason. So you would actually go under add and then perform command under action, which is it? Set option, maybe? Remember which is. It doesn't matter. Whichever. whatever command you want those guys to be triggered by a trigger, that's where you want to go to set it up. We're going to go back to triggers later, don't worry about it. Just know that's where it is. And then last tab is going to be summary. So again, if you want to coordinate different AI units so that they arrive at the same place at the same time, that's going to be a useful tab. You can see actually the route length, the average speed of your AI units, and then the range to their targets and the route time it takes for them to get there at the end of their waypoint routes, I suppose. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the airplane group. Next button over here is going to be the helicopter group, which is the same damn thing as the airplane group, except that's how you spawn choppers. You can see over here under type, choppers, there's no airplanes over here. It's the same thing. Same options, same everything. So don't worry about that. Now, fourth button over here, ground units. They work pretty much in the same way as the airplane and the helicopter groups, but not really in the same. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. That's where you go to spawn a vehicle group. So let's say I want to have a small convoy patrolling around here around Batumi, say. So I'd click on ground units and then choose my country. So let's go for USA, and then category doesn't matter. Let's go for an APC, and then let's plop one down over here. So we're going to go under units, and then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we got 4 units in our convoy. But we don't want all of them to be APCs. We want some diversity over there. So over here under edit, well, you click on edit actually, and then you can select each unit of the vehicle group individually and then change them. So let's say I want my second unit in my convoy to be near defense. I could change the category to air defense and go for a Vulcan, let's say. Third one could be, I don't know, artillery, MLRS, I don't know what that is. And then fourth one could be unarmed and an Humvee, let's say. So when you make convoys, that way, never make different groups for different units. Always make one group and then change the units inside that groups to be from different types. It makes it way easier to set waypoints and set up templates, which is what we're gonna see next soon. So, we have our 4 units over here, the APC, the anti-air, the tank, and the Humvee. So, we want to set some waypoints around Batumi over here. So, we're going to go to Add over here, and then set a waypoint. But, now as you can see, our units are scattered across the field to start up from, and then our waypoint is set so that those guys are just gonna go across the field and don't care about the road. So we're gonna change our waypoint to waypoint 0, which is their initial point, and then change the type of waypoint to on road. So as you can see, those guys just snapped on the road right now. And then we're going to go to waypoint 1 and change that to on road as well. And now the waypoint line just snapped to the road. So those guys are going to follow waypoint 0 to waypoint 1, following the road over here. So we can add a few waypoints. Let's say over here, follows the road as well. Over here and over here. Now, we want those guys to go around the airfield over here and to rejoin the road over here. But there's no road. So we'll change the waypoint type. We'll add just a waypoint over here, doesn't matter, waypoint 5, and change it to off-road. And go down to edit, and just move it right over here. So those guys are going to follow the road until waypoint 4, and then go off-road to waypoint 5. And then say there were some enemies down here, and you didn't want those guys to be in a column because they would be too exposed to those guys. So next waypoint, you could say, all right, I want waypoint 6 over here. Waypoint 6, I want those guys to follow formation. So then you could go, all right, I want those guys to go into a V formation. So then from waypoint 5 to waypoint 6, they would follow a V formation over here. So just, I don't know, add another waypoint over here, waypoint 7. Waypoint 7 is going to be on the road, and waypoint 8 just behind their initial point. And then at waypoint 8, because we want those guys to go around the airfield perpetually, we would just go into advanced waypoint actions, add, perform command, go to waypoint, and then waypoint 0. And then those guys would just cycle around the airfield perpetually over here. And that's how you do convoy/patrol. Now, let's do a roadblock. You want to be fancy, you want to add a roadblock to your missions. And you don't want to add just one roadblock because you're a fancy mission maker. You want to put a lot of them down, and you don't want to do each one of them manually because it's a pain in the ass. So what you're going to do is you're going to do a template. To do a template, first of all, maybe the most important thing to remember is do your first template facing direct north. Because you're going to save your template facing north, basically, and then you can recall them and change the orientation. But the orientation is going to be based upon the template you first saved. So, we're going to do a template over here, just out of Batumi. That looks like a pretty good crossroads. You can check the orientation again with your middle mouse click. So, over here, that's 357 degrees. That's close enough for what we want to do. We're going to go back down to our ground units over here. And we're going to select under category, fortification. Now, in TAW we actually use a mod, I don't remember the name, I think it's range targets or something. That's all the units over here you can see with the asterisk before them, that's from that mod pack. The default units are at the bottom. They don't actually have a star before them. So we're just actually going to use something basic, which is a road outpost. And we're going to plop it down in the middle of the road. The road outposts, fun fact, you always plop down in the middle of the road because it represents the roadblock in itself. There's going to be some fortifications to the right side of it. That's something I'm going to show you afterwards. Don't worry about it. It's just something you should know. So, right now that's a pretty shitty roadblock because it's just some gate. We want to add some units to it. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. Not 5, I said 4. Alright, so now we got 4 units over here. Let's change, let's go down to edit. Whoops, not that. So selected second unit. Let's go for, I don't know, armor and a Bradley. All right. We're going to put down a Bradley on the left side of the road. Third unit's going to be some infantry with an M249 over here. Like that. And then fourth unit over here, going to be a watchtower on the left side of the road over here. So, the shitty thing when you're making a template is you don't exactly know where all the units are going to slot in together until you actually load up the map. So right now I'm just going to save it and load up on the map to see how my unit placement looks like. Because it's a trial and errors thing, and the first time you do it, basically your units are going to be inside of walls and it's going to look like crap. So, let's load up and see how it looks. So, we can see we have our outpost right here, and we actually have our Bradley inside of our base, which looks like crap. Same thing for our watchtower, and our guy is just standing in the middle of the field over there, not behind any sandbags. So that's something you actually want to look for when you're making a mission. That's something you want to refine. That's not something I'm going to do right now because it doesn't matter. We're not actually making a mission. But let's say you moved your things around and said, all right, so this arrangement of units looks kind of good. That's something I want to save. So then you select, you click on any unit of your vehicle group over here, and then you go on the left and click on the both thingy icon, which says create and modify templates. You go over there, and then it says create new template. So selected vehicle group. It says new vehicle group number 1 because I actually didn't bother to give it a name over here. It doesn't matter. And I could give it a template name, which is Roadblock 2, because I actually have 2 template names of that name. So just save it. And then over here under templates, I could go back and select Roadblock 2 and plop how many, I could plop tons of them down. It wouldn't matter. And then that's why it's important. I told you to make your templates facing north, because say I wanted to make a roadblock facing this direction over here, which is 250 degrees, I'd select my template and heading, just adjust it to 250 degrees. Close enough. And then plop it down, and then you'd see my template would be facing the direction of the road over here. So that's something important to remember. There's really a lot of units you can choose from when making a mission. If you don't remember what specific kind of unit whatever you selected is, say this, an APC AAV7, you don't know what that is, under the second tab over here, which is ammo, if you click that, you're actually going to get a preview of your unit, so you can say, all right, that's an APC, that's actually what I wanted, or not. That's a shortcut. It saves you the trip towards the encyclopedia. There's a button I skip over here, which was under the helicopters, which is add or modify ship group. It works pretty much the same as the airplane, helicopter, or ground units tab, except we can use the naval groups to actually spawn planes on them. So say we wanted to plop down a Stannis to plop down some F-18s on them. So we'd actually go down to country, USA, and then under type, we'd go to John C. Stennis, go over there. So now we have a carrier spawned over here. And now to put down some units over them, on it, you would go to add or modify airplane group, and then choose some F-18s. Whoops, F-18s. You don't need to click directly on it, you can just click near it. And then you would go down to the route tab, waypoint type, you would go to take off from parking hot, and then you see it's gonna snap on directly to the carrier, and you can change the parking spot on it for that. Otherwise, it works pretty much the same as the airplane groups or the helicopter groups or the ground units. Now, if you want to add some static structures to your world, that's the fifth button over here, the bridge icon. So add or modify static object. Basically, the things you can add over here. You can add some cargoes. So if you wanted to put down some ammo crates or whatever you want some helicopter pilots to pick up, that's where you would actually go. So let's put down some ammo crates over here. And then you can see you have the option can be cargo over here. You need to check that if you want your pilots to be able to lift them. You can adjust the mass. Link unit, you don't need that, as well as offset fixation. Although for our mission we actually use CTLD to pick up stuff, we don't actually sling them. I'm not an expert on how CTLD works, but if you want to sling stuff, that's where you go. So, the other kind of stuff you can put down as static objects. You can put down some FARPs. So if you go down to heliports, you have the type FARP, gas platform, helipad, and oil rig. So they all work pretty much the same. Let's select the oil rig because they look good. You can just click. Whoops! You can just click in the middle nowhere. There you go. That's an oil rig. You can change their call sign on the radio, the frequency to which you contact them. Link unit, again, that's not important. And if you wanted to put down some helicopter on it, that's the same as a carrier. You just select like helicopter group. We're going to select some K-50s. Click somewhere in the ocean. Go underneath route. And then waypoint 0 type. Take off from parking hot, it's going to snap right to it, and then you can change the parking spot. They all work in the same way. Also, if you want to be a fancy schmancy mission maker, and you want to add some effects like burning towers of smoke in your city, that's also where you would go under static objects. Under category, you can go to effects, and then you can have smokes. So let's say I want to add a big smoke column in the middle of Cabuletti over here. I click over there, and I can change the density from 0 to 10 and change the preset as well. However, from experience, I find that the smoke effects make your game lag a lot, so use with parsimony. Alright. That's pretty much it for static objects. Next button is going to be Bullseye. So that's where you click to actually edit the bullseyes for your mission. By default, there's always going to be a bullseye for the red and blue team. And bullseyes are what you use for your bra calls. So if you have an AWACS in the air, the AWACS are going to make the bra calls relative to your bullseye. That's military thing, so like the enemy, if they're listening in on your radio, they don't actually know where your AWACS is. It's all the calls that are made are relative towards an arbitrary point, basically. So you want to put your bullseye, say if you were Again, attacking this this airfield over here, you could want to put your waypoint over Koboleti town, and then all the Brock halls would be made relative to that. Alright, next button over here, that's going to be trigger zone. We're going to come back to it later when we're talking about triggers. Templates, we've already talked about that. Trigger zone lists. Trigger zone lists, well, that's where you want to go when you want to find your triggers. Basically, when you're making a mission, well, right now it doesn't look like much, there's not much stuff on the map, but it gets cluttered very, very easily. You can find this by yourself. All the missions in DCS you can open up in the mission editor. Like all the tutorials for like the A10s, there's an insane amount of triggers. All the default missions that come with the game you can open up and edit yourself. You're gonna see there's tons and tons and tons of stuff. You can't just go and click on the map on them because you're gonna click on 10 different stuff before you actually cycle through what you want. So you're actually gonna go click on view trigger list over here and just select it by its name. It's just way easier. Same thing over here for view unit list. Same thing, but for your units. We can see over here we have our 10 A10 Charlies. Over here, we just click on it, it snaps automatically, and it opens up our airplane group tab over here. The red X is what you click if you want to delete stuff. It's not exactly useful. I just usually click on something and then press delete. It does the same damn thing. It's not like a toggle or anything. It's just there. Then under map, the key over there is what you click if you want to change, if you want to declutter your map, say. So, say you didn't want the orange outlines which represent the cities to appear in your map because you don't actually care about that. So you'd click on the key over there, and then you'd go find town, and then click towns, and then you can see those disappear. If you didn't care about the grids for your mission, you can just go click MRGS grid, and they're gonna disappear. Now that doesn't affect the mission in itself. That just affects you. It just affects you when you're making the mission. So don't worry about your users. That's just for your quality of life. All right. Now the real stuff. Let's talk about triggers. So, we're gonna make something very simple. We're gonna have some F-18s take off from Koboleti over there and just go towards the ocean. And what we want is to have some MiGs taken off from Sukumi as soon as those F-18s are over the ocean. However, we don't want those MiGs to take off before the F-18s. So, let's do that. First of all, let's spawn some F-18s. So we choose our country, USA, go down, F-18s, click anywhere, doesn't matter, and let's click take off from the runway. And then we're gonna add a waypoint, way out here in the ocean, we don't care. So, what's going to happen is as soon as we start the mission, those guys are just going to take off and go towards that waypoint. That's all we care about. Next, we need to add the MiGs. So let's go to Sukumi, and then click on Add Modifier Plane Group, change the country to Russia, and select our MiGs. We have MiGs over here. Oh, actually, before I do that, let's go back to our F-18s. One thing I forgot to do is to name our group. So select the F-18 and then under name, we actually need to give it a variable name. That's going to be real useful when you do your triggers because you're going to have a long list of items to select from. You want to give it a good representative name. So right now we just have one type of plane, Cabuletti. We don't really care about it. We're just going to name it F-18 Cabuletti. That's going to be good enough for our purposes. All right. So we're going to go back up to Sukumi, where we have our MiGs. So we have one MiG-29 starting hot on the runway over here. And what we want is for him to take off and then actually come down over here. Whoops. Come down over here at Cabuletti to try and intercept our F-18. Now, we don't want it to start right away. So what we're going to do is click on right over here on late activation. And what that means is that plane is not going to exist in the game. It's not going to appear at all until it is triggered to appear. Once it's triggered, it's going to appear in the middle of the runway and take off and follow its flight plan. So, how do we trigger it? There's several ways to do this. But what we're going to do is actually set up a trigger zone. So, on the left side of your screen over here, under Bullseye, is next between in the middle of the square called Create Trigger Zone. So we're going to click over here in the middle of the ocean, doesn't matter, and it creates a trigger zone, as you can see. So we're going to give it a name called Interceptor Launch. Whoops. Interceptor Launch. You can change the radius. Doesn't matter. Let's go for 10,000. Same thing, same difference. And I actually forgot to name my interceptor group, so I'm gonna go back and name that the MiG Interceptors. Alright. So, we have our F-18 over there, and we have our MiGs over here, and our interceptor launch trigger zone over here. So, how do we actually launch it? We're going to go back over here under Mission, and this button called Set Rules for Trigger. You're going to click that, and that's going to open your trigger menu. That's probably the most complicated menu in the game. There's about 10 million options for you to do triggers. Anything you can imagine of, like on destruction of a unit's broadcast a message to the server. Say if there's 4 blue planes that cross the border, launch these and these units, you can do all that. I'm not going to go into details into each kind of triggers and conditions and actions you can do. I'm just going to give you an idea of what you can do for this kind of situation. That's something you're going to have to explore for yourself. Hopefully that's going to give you an idea. So, again, what we want to do is when our F-18s launch and cross this trigger zone over here, we want those guys to take off and try and intercept them. So, for triggers, we create a new trigger. Type, you have once, which is it's just going to trigger once. 2 is each time the trigger conditions are met, it will do that action. We don't really care about that. Switched is an on and off switch, basically. And 4th is just on mission start, do such action. For us, we only care about once, so that's what we choose. Comment is the name of your trigger. Again, choose something evocative. For us, that's going to be MiG Interceptor Launch. Whoops. There we go. And event, we're going to leave on no event right now. There's tons of stuff. We're going to go back to these later. Don't worry about it. Now, for conditions, we're going to click on New. And what we want basically is that as soon as any blue plane enters that zone, we want those guys to launch. So under type, we're going to go over there and then choose part of coalition and zone, blue, and zone interceptor launch, which means as soon as there's a blue guy in this zone over here called interceptor launch, do this action. Now, under conditions, you can add multiple conditions as much as you want. By default, those are if you add multiple conditions, those are considered AND actions. So all those must be resolved at the same times for the action to take place. And you can add OR conditions as well. So either OR conditions need to be valid for the action to take place. But for whatever we're trying to do over here, we just need one condition, which is as soon as a blue guy passes through it, launch those interceptors. Now we go down into action and new. So part of group and zone, part of coalition and zone, I'm sorry, blue. Interceptor launch, action, new. Alright, now what we want to select for those guys to actually activate is going to be under action, and it's called group activate over here. And then under group, we're going to select MiG interceptors, which is what we call those guys over here. And that's your trigger, basically. It says, all right, that's my trigger over here. Under condition, as soon as a blue guy passes interceptor launch zone, it's going to activate my group MiG interceptors, and then those guys are just going to follow the flight plan over here and do whatever they're meant to do. Now, let's try something else. Let's say we want to show off to all our friends how cool we are, and how precise we can be into bombing some targets. So we're going to add some units over here, again at their favorite airfield. Let's select some Russian armor, doesn't matter, some BDR-80s, and plop one down over here, which we're going to name for Sod, which is going to be killed. So that's our guy over here. Now, the trigger I'm going to aim to make is that when this guy is killed, it's going to broadcast a message to the server saying Bullseye for 10 seconds. Well, to the blue coalition. So, what I'm going to do is again go back to our triggers over here, set rule for triggers, and then go down under triggers, new. I only want it to fire once because I only have one unit. However, if I add several units, I could select continuous. I'm not going to do that right now. Comment, I'm just going to call Bullseye, doesn't matter. And then on event, I'm going to choose on destroy, because that's the event I'm looking for. I'm looking for this guy being destroyed. For condition, I'm going to choose under type, unit dead. And then under unit, I can choose, what did I name it? Oh, I didn't actually name my unit. My unit by default is named unit number 37. I just named the group Poor Sod. So I'm gonna name it Poor Sod 1. And of course it erased my trigger, so let's do it again. Bullseye. Event on destroy. Condition. Unit dead. And then unit, I can see Poor Sod number 1 over here. And then under action, I would click new. And go to message to coalition. Coalition blue. And then I'd say Bullseye for 10 seconds. So as soon as that guy is destroyed, it's going to broadcast a message to all my teammates saying Bullseye. Now you can see there's a lot of stuff you can do with triggers. There's way too much for me to explain in just tonight's lesson. We'd still be here tomorrow. That's something you're going to have to explore by yourself. But basically, you can do pretty much anything you can imagine, as far as I know. I believe you can do some Lua programming as well. That might be what this initialization script is for. I know if you go under conditions over here, you can set Lua predicate, and under text you can actually set a Lua, some Lua conditions, some Lua programming using your variable names you set for your units in your group. But that's way too advanced for it. Just know it's there if you want to do it, if you want to actually learn it. That's something you can do. So that's the kind of stuff you can do with triggers, basically. Now, if we look at the bottom of the map over here, you have the name of your mission over here. To the right of that, that's your latitude and longitude. That represents your position on the map, where your marker is where your cursor is pointing. And then right next to that, you got your altitude as well, by default, which is in feet. See, if I go over there to the highest mountain on the map, it goes to 1,000 or something. Doesn't matter. Anyway. So that could be useful when placing down units. Say you want to put down a JTAC. That's not actually something I've shown, so I'm going to do that right now. Say you want to put down a JTAC to designate this BTR as a target for your teammates. So you would go down in ground units, and then choose country, USA, unarmed. This Humvee over here, and then plop one down over here. So we got one Humvee right now, and need to actually set it as a JTAC. Here under perform task, FAC, assign group, and then he's going to act as a JTAC. So you can choose the group of target you actually want to designate. In this case, it's poor sod. And you can choose your weapons, the kind of designation you want. So let's choose laser, your call sign, number, frequency, etc. Now, this JTAC is functional because it actually has line of sight. So you can see this one is at 46 feet. This guy is at 33 feet. But let's say I move this guy way over here in the mountains where he has no line of sight. If I try and edit his fact command, you'd see under designation over here it says laser problem, no line of sight, and distance over 5 nautical miles. So that's something you can see when you design missions, if your JTACs are actually going to be able to perform their task or not. That's where you would see it. So I'm just going to move him back over here, and then see it moves back to being valid. Again, let's move back to the bottom of the map over here, next to pan select. That's where you actually choose your map background. So by default it is to altitude, which is the altitude of the terrain. Satellite is the satellite picture of the Caucasus region, and then map is a mix of the two with the different airfields and information relative to the terrain. I'm gonna leave it on alt. Now let's move up to over here, to the right of Mission Editor. That's pretty much all the functionalities you can find with the hotkeys on the left. There's some stuff you might use not that often, but it's good to know that it's there. Under File, there's nothing new over here. New file, open file, save, pretty much. Edit is pretty much the same. You can add all the kind of groups we talked about, templates. Under Flight, you can go there to fly your mission to test it out. That's also where you would go to actually fly a replay of your map. Like, you can save replays of games you've actually played and then replay them to, like, film them in a cinematic fashion. That's where you would go. That would be under Replay. Or under Record AVI, I'm not exactly sure, but it's one of those two things. Campaign Builder, well, that's where you want to go if you want to make a campaign. That's not something I've tried out, but that's where it is. Customized missions options, we talked about it. Map option as well. Locale, that's where you go if you want to change the language of your mission, and the locale as well. Set position. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's just where you click if you want to input some coordinates and then it snaps you to that position, though I'm not 100% on it. Mission generator, that's something that's actually pretty useful if you want to generate a mission and not do everything from scratch. There's basic mission generator in DCS where you can say, alright, I want to fly that kind of plane, take off from that kind of airfield, and do that kind of mission. And it can generate that mission for you. If you do that in the mission editor, then you're going to see all the units on the map and you can change everything. It can save you a few steps in making the kind of mission you want. Save you some hassle. That's also where you want to go if you want to use some generic templates. So under Mission Editor templates, there's tons of generic templates you can use to plop down on the map for your missions. That's pretty self-explanatory. And finally under MISC, well, there's the encyclopedia, so if you don't know what a specific type of unit is, that's where you go. Say, alright, that's what this is. And you know exactly what you put in your mission.
And that's it for today. Sorry for ending the video abruptly. It is my first time recording and there were some TeamSpeak shenanigans I needed to cut out. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful to you, and as I said before, if you have any comments, questions, or idea about a future video subject, please leave us a comment below. We'd love to read it. So thank you very much for watching, and have yourself a nice day.